Donald Trump, PolitiFact, July 15, 2025, in comments to reporters. The Jeffrey Epstein files were made up by Comey, they were made up by Obama, and they were made up by Biden. So I just wanted to clarify that so you all didn't think that I was making it up by what I had heard. So this is Donald Trump pictured here. President Donald Trump, he walks from Marine One after arriving in the south lawn of the White House. So Trump said Obama and Biden made up the Epstein files, but neither were in office when FBI had investigated. The Epstein files refer to the federal government's investigation files pertaining to the prosecution of a deceased sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein. The two federal investigations into Epstein took place in 2006 and 2008 and 2019 during the George W. Bush and Trump administration. So former FBI Director James Comey was working in a private sector during those periods. The FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Florida conducted the 2006 federal investigation. In 2019, the Southern District of New York office filed federal charges. So facing backlash from his base over his administration's handling of the Epstein files, President Donald Trump shifted blame to his Democratic predecessors. So Trump's Justice Department on July the 7th announced it would not be releasing any more documents related to the deceased sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, who died in federal custody in 2019 following his arrest on federal sex trafficking and conspiracy charges. The announcement came as a surprise to many Trump supporters who had hoped his cabinet members would follow through on the promises to release all the Epstein case files. Speaking to reporters July 15th on the White House lawn, Trump said Attorney General Pam Bondi had briefed him on her review of the government's investigative files on Epstein before announcing her office would not be releasing any additional case documents. You know, these files were made up by Comey, Trump told reporters, referring to the former FBI Director James Comey. They were made up by Obama. They were made up by Biden. He went further in the Truth Social post the next day, calling the Epstein files a hoax and a scam pushed by Democrats. He has continued to make similar claims. Trump's argument that the documents were made up by the Democratic officials doesn't add up. The two federal investigations into Epstein happened from 2006 to 2008 and 2019 during the George W. Bush and Trump administrations, not during the 10 years of President Barack Obama or Joe Biden, and not while Comey was leading the FBI. The White House did not respond to PolitiFact's request for comment for providing evidence in support of this claim. First federal investigation started and ended under the Bush administration. Local police first began investigating Epstein in March of 2005 following reports that he was molesting young girls at his Palm Beach, Florida mansion. In July of 2006, Epstein was arrested on one charge of soliciting prostitution following a grand jury indictment. A 2020 Justice Department report said local police department officials were dissatisfied with the low-level charges and asked FBI to intervene. The FBI opened an investigation May 2006. Assistant U.S. Attorney Anne Marie C. Villafana and 2 FBI case agents led the initial federal investigation. So in 2007, while Bush was president, federal investigators at the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office prepared to indict Epstein. But negotiations between Epstein's lawyers and the U.S. Attorney Office in Florida's Southern District, led by Alexander Acosta, resulted in a secret deal that led Epstein to avoid the federal charges. As part of the non-prosecution agreement, Epstein agreed to plead guilty to the state prostitution charges, register as a sex offender, and serve 18 months in the county jail, and provide monetary damages to his victims. So in exchange, the U.S. Attorney's Office agreed to end its investigation into Epstein and forgo federal prosecution of Epstein or any potential co-conspirators, according to the agreement. So in June of 2008, Epstein was sentenced to 18 months in jail, but served most of his sentence on a work release program in which he was allowed to leave jail during the day and return at night. By the time he was released to house arrest in July of 2009, Obama had been in the White House for about 6 months. Investigations resumed in 2018 under Trump administration. So the Justice Department's 2020 report said Epstein spent the next decade, from 2009 to 2019, which overlapped the 8 years of the Obama administration and 2 years of Trump, embroiled in legal battles with victims who were seeking monetary damages and challenging the validity of the non-prosecution agreement. During this period, the U.S. Attorney's Office fought efforts to unseal documents. So in 2016, a federal judge found the FBI was not complying with Freedom of Information Act requests related to Epstein's case, The Guardian reported at the time. Details of Epstein's conduct, his powerful connections, and allegations of federal cover-up were featured in news stories during this period, typically brought forward by Epstein's victims. So in 2017, Trump nominated Acosta, the Florida prosecutor who approved Epstein's 2008 non-prosecution agreement, to become U.S. Labor Secretary. The case regained widespread public scrutiny in November of 2018, when the Miami Herald published a detailed report about Epstein's conduct and the federal government's secret deals with Epstein. So in July of 2019, while Trump was president, Epstein was arrested on federal charges after the judge found the non-prosecution agreement had violated victims' rights laws. Epstein was charged with recruiting dozens of underage girls to his New York City mansion and Palm Beach estate from 2002 to 2005 to engage in sex acts for money. But he was never tried for those crimes. He was found dead in the Manhattan jail cell August 10, 2019, and investigators concluded that he died of suicide. Epstein's longtime partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, was arrested on federal charges of conspiracy to sexually abusing minors in July of 2020. Comey worked in the private sector during both investigations, so he had served in different government roles for 3 decades, but he was not working at the FBI or Justice Department during the Epstein investigations. So from 2001 to August 2005, Comey worked under the Bush administration's Justice Department, the last 2 of those years as Deputy Attorney General. He left to join the private sector in late 2005, 9 months before the FBI launched its first investigation into the Epstein files. So Comey returned to serve as FBI director in 2013 under Obama until Trump fired him in 2017. Biden administration did not release documents. Epstein co-conspirator Maxwell convicted in 2021. The Biden administration did not publicly release any files related to the investigation into Epstein, but federal judges unsealed several troves of court documents from previously settled civil cases from Biden while Biden was in office. So the release files, they came from a 2009 settlement between Epstein and one of his victims, and a defamation case while against Maxwell that was settled in 2017. So Maxwell's federal court trial happened in November of 2021 while Biden was in office. So she was convicted of 5 counts of related to sex trafficking of minors between 1994 to 2004. So she was sentenced in 2022 to 20 years in prison, which she is still now currently. Maxwell's trial involved the unsealing of documents from 2017 settled defamation suits and the bank records, photos, and flight logs as well. But the judge restricted the release of Maxwell's entire address book, which some believe could hold incriminating details about clients involved in this sex trafficking that was going on. So on July of 17th, the Trump administration, they fired the undisclosed reason Maureen Comey, the federal prosecutor who worked on the Epstein and Maxwell cases, and the James Comey's daughter as well. So after celebrity gossip site Radar Online sued FBI seeking documents related to the Epstein case, Maureen Comey in early 2024 argued against releasing the case's investigative files on grounds that doing so could interfere with Maxwell's appeal. So the court sided with the prosecution to withholding them. Maxwell's appeal was denied by the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in September. So their ruling, Trump said that the Epstein files were made up by Comey. They were made up by Obama, and they were made up by Biden. Trump did not explain what he meant, and the White House did not provide any evidence to support his claim either. But the files are not made up by anyone. They are collectively represent investigative evidence and findings from law enforcement documents, victims, and testimonies in court cases. Neither Obama nor Biden were in office when the FBI investigated Epstein. Bush and Trump were. And Comey worked in the private sector during those investigative periods. So both Epstein and Maxwell were arrested on federal charges during the Trump administration. There is no evidence that Epstein files were made up by Comey, Obama, or Biden. We rate this statement pants on fire. So this is basically the whole article. And it's just basically saying the more and more you see how defensive Trump is getting about this Epstein thing, is the more allegedly you would assume that he may be involved in most of this. And I'm going to say I suspect that he, and more than him, there's others that are in high seats involved in this. And I feel like a lot of these things could be connected to other people who were in trouble with sex trafficking. And I'm not going to say the names because I think you can throw some of those names out there. There's some people already under fire for similar things such as this. But I believe all of it is connected in some way. Because I feel like this, and this is my opinion, and I'm going to say allegedly, when you have one sex trafficker, that sex trafficker knows other sex traffickers and other people involved in those types of activities. And so I believe if they are all rich and they're all powerful and they have a lot of money invested in the entertainment world or the political world, they will protect one another. And however they have to do it, that's how they'll do it. And if they gotta lie, if they gotta cheat, if they gotta have a straight face when they lie, they'll do it. And so I believe if you look at all of the photos of Trump going to the parties and hanging out with Epstein and befriending him, you gotta ask yourself this question, how could you be so close? And when you go to parties, people don't invite just anybody to parties that they don't really associate with and have like full-on conversations, and they're patting each other on the back. You're bringing your children around them. When you do things like, you really know that person, you have a good relationship with them, or at least some type of association with them, enough that you know personal things. You might even know some more information about them. Even if you're aware of these things, that makes you just as incriminating as the people that are involved, and somehow you'd had to been involved somewhere. So from what I was hearing through internet rumors and talk, that Melania allegedly, Trump allegedly, they were all if not involved in Epstein's life deep enough that they might have been all involved in what Epstein was involved in with the trafficking, that they had knowledge of what was going on, and it was something that they were participating in somewhat, that there was more to the stories than what people know. A lot of people feel like these ways of him acting defensive and making up allegations against other previous administrations just makes it look worse for him, that he's hiding something. And by him, one minute Pam Bondi says she has the flight list, next minute you hear she's not releasing the flight list, is a red flag for a lot of people. Says that maybe they saw some things in there that they didn't want to reveal, and then that would also make it pretty murky as to who we have leading the free world. Already we have a lot of things happening that a lot of people are questioning, that don't make sense, that seem very unconstitutional and cold-hearted. But now this, having a president that he's also has convictions, and then he also was linked to a well-known sex trafficker who was convicted of his crimes, to have a flight list, and Ghislaine Maxwell, serving 20 years in prison, is now asking to be released. They're using her as the go-to person to clear the name of this president. It seems all nefarious. So that is the reason why people are not really jazzed about any of this, because it smells of a cover-up.